All right, this is Dr. Mounts with All Things Unexplained. We talk about everything from Bigfoot to aliens to astrophysics and everything in between. So if that sort of thing is for you, give us a follow on all our social media and follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. Speaking of podcast, it takes a lot to make a show. And thanks to listeners like you, this show is possible. You can check us out on Venmo at Bigfoot UFO. And now, here is Larry to bring us in.
All Things Unexplained. Hosted by Dr. Mounts.
Let's face it, we were always ready to roll without him anyway.
CJ Derringer.
Ain't nobody perfect, right?
And Smitty Neebs.
I've never planned out hardly anything my whole life. I just freeball.
Featuring Cajun Man.
I'm just old nobody, somebody looking for somebody.
Hello, all you unexplained ones. Thank you for joining us. Boy, I hope you've buckled up because we have got a show for you. We are thrilled to have Jennifer Stein and Travis Walton with us on this show. They are here to talk to us about Travis Walton's abduction, everything from the abduction to the aftermath to the documentary that they've created. They are both well known in the UFO circle, and it is our honor and privilege to have them here with us. Thank you for joining us. We are going to jump right in. We're going to start with your story, Travis, if that's okay. So take us to the beginning. When and where did this all happen? And Travis, you might
want to unmute. Looks like Travis may have froze.
Yeah, he's frozen and possibly muted as well.
Yeah. I can tell you, fill in until Travis is able to join us.
Wonderful. Thank you.
His event happened November 5th, 1975 in the Sitgraves National Forest, which is on top of what's called the Mogollon Rim. And it is a large plateau that sits bordering a number of states. It covers parts of northern New Mexico, goes through northeastern Arizona, and goes straight on up into Colorado. It's a huge area. It's the largest ponderosa pine forest in the world, and the Sitgraves National Forest is part of our national forest, parks. Yeah. And he was working in a program called Timber Stand Improvement, and that is a form of logging where loggers go out and they contract to clear a certain amount of underbrush so that during fire seasons, when it's high and dry and windy, a huge fire doesn't break out and doesn't wipe out the whole forest. But this area also has a lot of lightning strikes, and that's one of the reasons why they do timber stand improvement contracts. So Travis was one of 7 members on the logging crew, and the logging crew chief was named Mike Rogers. And it was November, and it was the end of the day. They were logging, making what's called slash piles or stacked piles of wood to burn once it snowed. I think he's able to log back on with us now. Yes. And they were leaving the site. It was the end of the day, and they had all piled into the truck, and they were starting to head out of the regional area, the valley they were clearing, which is called the Turkey Springs Valley. And they were just heading up towards the Rim Road when they saw this strange light in the sky.
Yes.
So Travis, you can
perfect time to segue back to Travis.
If you can hear us, Travis, can you hear us? He sort of still seems frozen. So as they were leaving the forest, and Travis, jump in anytime you want. As they were leaving the forest, they saw this odd light in the sky, and they weren't really on a road. It was just a clearing in the forest, driving up to a dirt road or a gravel road called the Rim Road. and it was in a valley. So as they were heading up this valley embankment, they see what looks like possibly a plane crash. It was bright light, possibly in the canopy of the trees. They couldn't quite figure out what it was. And they kind of agreed, well, they're going to have to hurry up and get up there and see what this odd light is. And when they got to the area where this light was shining through the trees and creating a bright light across the area they were passing, it wasn't even really a road. It was sitting there clear as day. They all saw it, and they were screaming, "Oh my God, it's a, effing UFO." Excuse my French. It's like, whoa.
Yeah. Well, that's what
There
you
was
would
no
say. Yeah.
doubt. It was not Venus. It wasn't the moon. The moon was behind them. Stars weren't quite up yet. And besides, they were surrounded by a high canopy of wooded trees, and this was below the canopy of the pine trees. There had been a large tree there, I think like an oak tree or something, that had been cut the year before, and that created a large clearing. And this disc was hovering in that clearing, kind of hiding, we think.
Incredible. Now,
And so
how old was Travis at this time?
Travis was 21 years old.
1 years old.
Mike Rogers, who was the crew boss, was 28 years old. There was another guy in the truck, in the middle of the truck, seated in the center seat, that was called Kenny Rogers. I'm sorry, Ken Peterson, Kenny
I was
Peterson.
gonna say he's got a
Not the
very famous
gambler.
name.
Yeah. You got
So,
no one to hold them.
Yeah. So, and anyway, Travis was right with the jump seat, the passenger side. He threw open the door and ran up this embankment. It was kind of up a little bit of a hill. He wanted a really good look at this thing. He was like, most times you see a craft, you startle upon one, and it takes off, right? And some of the other boys in the crew, said this thing was absolutely beautiful. It was looking at this high sophisticated piece of machinery. One of them said it was better than looking at a brand new Corvette. They were stunned.
I wasn't sure what you were about to say there.
Yeah.
Me either.
Yeah, there was a very sophisticated piece of machinery. It was undulating slightly. It was turning slightly. And once Travis got under it, it started to kind of rise up a little bit. They could feel static electric charge building up on their bodies, their hair was starting to stand up on end. They could hear high-pitched sounds and very low-pitched sounds. Very unusual noises were coming out of the craft. So Travis decided he would jump for cover because the guys in the truck were screaming at him, like, "Travis, what the heck? Get back in the truck. Get back here. What are you doing?" And so he jumped behind a slash pile they had made a few weeks before when they had cleared that area. They were kind of moving their way down the valley, right? So about 3 weeks before, they'd been working there. So he jumped closer to the ship and kind of was almost directly under it at this point, trying to hide behind some logs and just look at it. And then he finally got the idea that, well, maybe this wasn't the brightest thing to do. So he stood up quickly to run back to the truck. And at that instant, it was like, boom, he was hit by this beam that came out of the craft. And it hit him kind of right in the chest. It threw him back like he'd been hit with a grenade. A couple of the guys had been in the military. One of them had spent time, actually, I think in Vietnam, he said, and he saw grenades go off. He saw people get hit. He said it was like an explosion had hit him and threw him backwards about a good 15 feet. And when Travis landed, he didn't make any attempt to break his fall. He just kind of landed and slumped, and the other guys in the truck assumed he was dead.
Yeah.
The force that hit him, it lit the whole forest up like daylight, and they could feel it in the truck. They could feel it in their bodies. They could feel it Mike Rogers said he could feel it in the steering wheel. So they slammed the door and started screaming at Mike Rogers to get the heck out of there, right?
Right.
So they did. Mike had the responsibility for protecting the rest of the guys in the crew, and he drove further up this kind of valley that they'd been working in called Turkey Springs. And when they got up to the dirt road, which is referred to as the Rim Road, it's also called Route 360, he decided that he had to go back and get Travis because he was the crew boss. They were all panicked and freaked out, right? So he knew he had to go back and get Travis. So he told all the other guys, "Look, get out of the truck. I'm going to give you some gasoline. move a slash pile into the middle of the road here, burn it, stay warm, and I'm gonna go back and get Travis. But here,
And
take some gas
Jennifer,
cans, build a fire.
can I ask you something about that?
Sure.
So this is one of those things that I've been trying to wrap my mind around, and I wonder what you think about this. And hopefully we can ask Travis. Travis, we're speaking to Jennifer Stein, director of the Travis Walton documentary, and Travis is having some technical difficulties, and hopefully he'll be able to rejoin us. And Jennifer, if you get a chance to message him or something, you might let him know we're still here. But one thing I've tried to wrap my mind around, I've talked to other people about this. I've spoke to Smitty about it, and CJ, and our military consultant, and different people. The point where Mike Rogers and the rest of the crew decided we're going to leave. We're going to leave Travis behind. What do you make of the psychology behind that?
Well, they were shocked by what had happened, and they didn't know if this craft wasn't going to hit them with a beam as well. And Mike had the responsibility for the lives of all these young men. And Travis never second guessed him. Even when Travis came back, Travis has commended Mike for taking off and protecting those boys as best he could. They were just totally freaked out. I can't imagine what I would have done in that situation. Of course, Travis did the stupid thing, getting out of this truck and running under it, or running right under the craft. But a few weeks before, he'd gotten out of the truck and went wah, 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 in front of a bear that was in the middle of the road to scare the bear out of the way so they could get around it. So Travis was known for maybe being a little wild at times,
And he was 21.
He's also, 21.
21.
Yeah, he rode a motorcycle and he wasn't married. He didn't have a family, and I think actually Mike did the right thing. But I'll tell you what transpired after they got to the top of this valley, because I think this is important for people to understand. Mike and Travis were very good friends. They'd been working together a couple of years already. I think since Travis had been about 17 or 18, he'd been logging. In fact, Travis went to school with Mike's younger brother, and Travis was dating Mike's younger sister and eventually married Mike's younger sister.
What?
And many people don't know that. Dana, Travis's wife, Travis is still married, although they don't live together right now, but they're still married. And they have been for, 45 years, something like that. And Dana is Mike Rogers' younger sister. So, it's kind of all in the family up there. And they're all Mormons.
No.
This is a Mormon community. These are Mormon men, they were young Mormon boys from a young Mormon community at that point. So long story short, they're at the top of the hill. They can look down the hill and they can see the craft now because they're above it. Right? They're up by the rim road. This craft is maybe, 100 feet below them down the hill. And Mike says to all the guys in the crew, get out, wait here. I'm taking the truck back. I'm going to go get Travis. None of the boys wanted to wait in the forest by themselves. None of them wanted to be away from each other. They all wanted to be together. And as soon as they got the truck turned around, they were all piling back into the truck. And what happened is they saw the craft take off. They saw it raise up and boom, it was gone. So they knew the craft wasn't there anymore. So they hightailed it back down to where they knew Travis was to pick him up because they knew they had to get him to a hospital or something. And then all the thoughts racing through their minds like, oh my gosh, nobody's going to believe us. How are we going to explain this? What if he's dead? What are we going to do? Right. Some of them were crying. Then they got there. They knew where they had stopped the truck because they knew this area. They'd been logging it for months now. They had an 8-month contract in this valley. And they could see where the tires had spun out on the truck when they took off. And there was no Travis. They knew exactly where he landed. By this time, the forest is dark. They turned the truck around, parked the headlights up there. They had one flashlight in the headlights of the truck. They're screaming for him. They're looking for him. They're looking for footprints, and they can't find him. And then the reality sinks in that they've got to go ask for help. They have to go call the police. And it's 45 minutes down a switchback road to the closest telephone. This is out in the middle of nowhere. There's no electric up there.
Right. And we're talking about the 70s, of course. So
yeah, there's a few cabins. There's a few fire towers for the, National Forestry Service, but that's about it. And those are far and few between, and they're not manned usually by November. So the Forest Service is usually only manning and looking for fires in like May, June, July, and August. That's about it.
Right.
So, and it's starting to get cold. It's November. So at this elevation, it could easily go down to 30, 32 degrees at night. No problem.
Yeah. It was high, right? What was the elevation where they were?
About 7,000 feet.
7,000 feet. That is high elevation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they did the right thing. They went down to the local closest phone booth and they called the closest sheriff's office. They dialed over the operator and asked to be connected to the police. And then a deputy came out, told them they all had to wait there at a gas station at a phone booth. And then a sheriff came out, a deputy sheriff named Deputy Ellison, Chuck Ellison. And, the drama begins. It's a long, dramatic story. And really, it ruined most of these boys' lives.
I know.
And
now, what
don't really understand that.
What exactly got you into studying about supernatural phenomenon, UFOs, and those types of things? What was your interest?
Most of us don't step into this field until we have an experience. Yeah. And I did myself when I was 19. I had an encounter at about 5:30 in the morning outside my bedroom window, but it was a very bizarre encounter because it was a rectangle of white light that was about 90 feet long and about 6 feet high that hovered above a big tree in a meadow that was right outside my bedroom window. I had a modern house that my dad built that was set in the side of a hill. So this thing was less than 500 feet from me.
Yeah.
And it didn't make any sense. It wasn't light when I woke up and saw this. I was startled in a dream. And when I woke up, this thing was basically not quite sitting outside my window. It was about 1.5 miles away, about 45 degrees on the horizon. But it was a rectangle of white light, and I saw it. And I was trying to journal in a journal and write down my dreams. So I was trying to write down the dream I had that startled me awake. And as I did that, I look out and I realize it's not light, but it's not completely dark either. It's like black and white. And there's this rectangle of light, sitting there, not moving, just sitting there. 1.5 miles away, 45 degrees on the horizon. And I think, well, that's weird. What's that? And then it doesn't move and it doesn't move and it doesn't move. And then I say it again, like, what the that?
Yeah.
And whoa, at that moment, it moves. It jumps in and out of reality. In 3 seconds, it's right outside my bedroom window. But it's not lighting anything up. But it's the most brilliant white light that can be, but it's not lighting up my bedroom where I have floor-to-ceiling windows. And I realize something is going on, and then I realize I can't move, and I start to cry because I don't have my faculties.
Oh,
and then a few seconds later, what I perceive is less than a minute, I know that it's leaving. I suddenly can move. It takes off very quickly in the opposite direction to about 1.5 miles away, about 45 degrees on the horizon in an opposite direction. And I jump up and say, wait a minute, what just happened? Who are you? What are you? Where are you from? What just, and then it just took off. So I wrote it all down in my journal. I woke my mother up in the next bedroom and said, did you see this? Did you see this? And she remembers that quite well. I journaled it all. But I never knew what it was until about 25 years after the event. And someone else who was staying in my house in another floor of the house saw the same thing. And they asked me about it. And that's, this happened when I was 19, just turning 20. And then when I was 45, this friend came to me and said, we have to discuss this. But it's just astonishing to me that we never discussed it at the time.
Right.
So that is what really affected me. This event stayed in my gray box for a long time. And when I finally realized it was real, I kind of had to take a couple steps back in my life, right?
Yeah.
I lived in a very conservative community. I had a very, traditional marriage and children, and I was part of nonprofits and sat on boards and did lots of good community things. But to step into the UFO field was a little woo-woo for me. But I kind of felt like I had the responsibility to do that, because either I was going to know that this was real and that this was the next big frontier to unravel and understand.
Yeah.
Like consciousness, like knowing yourself, like being able to go within, like life after death experiences, like understanding synchronicity. All these things have been happening in my life, and it was time I began to digest them. So this wasn't that big of a step for me, although it appeared to be for many people around me.
I think that what you said, the veil of secrecy of anyone that has experienced something, is pretty common, especially during that period of time. And that's what's kind of phenomenal about Travis's experience, that it was automatically documented with the police authorities as it was almost happening. I mean, moments after it happened. And
that is right.
And
the other thing,
go ahead.
Well, Smitty, the other thing I will say is that this is why I have so much respect for Travis Walton.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I had a choice in deciding how I wanted to be involved in this field, and I didn't come out and tell people my story for years. I just started hosting speakers and joined the Mutual UFO Network and became a field investigator. And, I did logical, small, safe steps.
Right.
Travis was gone for 5 days. He was missing. There was over 500 people looking for him on horseback with helicopters, police, Navajo search and rescue, dogs, from the local, police station were out hunting for him. So when he came back, he was being hounded. Like, where were you? What did you do? And everyone suspected of him making this up or hiding out in the forest. Even today, people accuse him of hoaxing this event. And God knows it was so complex. I don't know how he could have ever hoaxed it. In fact, I wouldn't have made the documentary if I had any doubt. Right. And then on top of that, Paramount Pictures decided to come in and make a fictional movie about it. Although they tried to kind of follow the general story, but some facts were changed, and certainly what happened on board the craft, what he remembers of that, which is quite an amazing story.
Yes.
It's really a very powerful story, and it's undeniable because there were way too many people involved, right?
Who saw it. That's what
I mean,
so
all
incredible.
The loggers, and the fact that the police suspected them of murdering Travis because he was missing for 5 days. So they all underwent polygraph tests. That never happens in a UFO case. Those are expensive. Who's going to go take a polygraph when you see a UFO? Who's going to pay for that? It's several $100s a piece. But the Arizona, police department demanded that these kids take it because they were afraid they were lying, and they all passed.
Wow.
So,
it is
my
such an incredible story.
I interview the police. I interview Chuck Ellison and Deputy Gillespie as well. And I also interview Cy Gilson, who was the Arizona State polygraph expert at the time, who did the polygraph test. And now I know Cy Gilson and Marlon Gillespie have passed on. I think Chuck Ellison is still with us, but honestly, I am not sure.
It's an incredible story, and good for you for doing this documentary and allowing Travis to tell the truth, because it seems like even with this Fire in the Sky movie that came out, it was not portrayed exactly as it happened. And then people do start questioning, and Travis knows what happened. Mike knows what he saw. They have two sides of that story, and you got to piece it all together, which is wonderful. And I do believe we have a clip from the documentary, and I'm wondering, those of you that are tuning in, we've got Jennifer Stein, and we had Travis Walton for a brief moment there, but he's having some technical difficulties. Maybe while we show this clip, Jennifer, you could reach out to him and see if he's able to try and hop back in here, and then he can tell us firsthand what happened on that.
I'll be happy to. I'll just mute myself so I can make a
Okay,
quick
wonderful.
call.
Thank you.
Great. And I'm going to pull this clip up. This, I believe, is courtesy of Jennifer Stein, director of the Travis Walton documentary. Folks, I actually had a listener text me a possible explanation behind Travis's technical difficulties. Apparently, Mercury is in retrograde until May 14th, and that always affects technology. And that's what I was texted. So go figure. But here is a clip of Travis's experience on board the ship, not as we saw on Fire in the Sky, but as according to Travis Walton himself.
When I regained consciousness, I was in such pain that it would actually sort of knock me back out again, the pain. I knew something was terribly wrong with my body. I could move, but it was so difficult. But I felt I was probably safe in a hospital, that I was being taken care of. There was some sort of device across my chest. I had a lot of pain in my chest. I could hear the sounds of movement around me, and I just took this to be doctors. Then when I looked in the direction of the movement sounds, I could see blurry forms that I thought were doctors wearing surgical caps and masks. So when I sharpened the focus in my eyes, I could see that was not the case. I was looking into the face of this creature. Then I knew I was in very great danger. And here this face was so close to me, another right behind him. The fear gave me the strength to raise my arm. It pushed the one that was standing close to me back, and he fell into the other one. I was rolling away from him, and this object across my chest fell off. I got on my feet and staggered back, and I bumped up against a shelf, and there was an array of instruments laying out there. I just glanced, grabbed the biggest thing I could find, and started flailing in their direction to keep them from coming any closer. That moment was the focus of my nightmares for months afterward. They stopped with their hands extended towards me and staring in a way that felt invasive and intrusive, like they were looking inside of me. It was horrible. I came to realize that it had to do with the stare, and the stare was them trying to reassert control, I think. Once it was apparent they weren't going to physically or even telepathically control me, they turned and left the room and went to the right. And so I went in the opposite direction that they had gone. Were they behind me? Were they pursuing me? Or was around this tight curve that I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead, was I going to run into something worse? Adding to the panic was this feeling of suffocation, this feeling I was about to pass out from lack of air. I came to a doorway and looked in. I was fearful of the chair in the middle. It was a high-back chair, and I was afraid there could be someone sitting in it. So when I moved to the side and could see that there was no one in it, then I moved towards the chair. And it was then that I realized that the closer I came to the center of the room, the walls, the floor, the ceiling were darkened except for points of light. It was a planetarium kind of a projection. My main concern was open these doors. I assumed that perhaps the buttons that were on the arm of this chair might open the door. That moved the star pattern. I was already unsteady on my feet. I turned and there was a man in the door. He had this glass helmet over his head. I started towards him, babbling questions and trying to tell him about these creatures that were there. He took me by the arm and was leading me out. We went through what I think was an airlock. You know, this door closed and that door opened and we went out. At this point, the craft we came out of was parked inside of this big hangar-like building, or it might have been part of a larger craft. He led me towards the vertical wall opposite this, through some doors, down a hallway, into a room where there were some other people. They were very similar to him. A similar dress, similar coloring, light colored hair, light colored eyes. They're leading me, taking me by the arm and putting me over towards this table. I was in a weakened condition, but I felt their strength. But still, the panic I had at being restrained like that, I was able to jerk one hand free, and they put this mask over my face, and I got my finger under the edge of that trying to pull it away. But before I could pull it away, boom, I was out.
Ooh, intense.
Pretty amazing.
So intense. So we're hopeful that Travis Walton is going to be able to jump back in here. He's having some technical difficulties, but in the meantime, we have the absolute best person to convey this story. We've got Jennifer Stein, who directed this documentary, produced this documentary that you just saw, which is called Travis, the true story of Travis Walton. So she has every insight that there is to exactly what happened. And it was her goal to tell the story in the most truthful way possible. So Jennifer, again, we thank you for joining us and for sharing that clip. One thing I wanted to go back to was, how big did they say the craft looked?
About 20 feet.
About 20 feet
across. 15 to 20 feet is the guesstimate.
So he assumes when he wakes up on this craft that it is different, correct?
Well, it certainly had to be larger than 20 feet, because probably the room he was in was at least 6 or 7 feet when he woke up, because he himself is about almost 6 feet tall. If you've ever met Travis, you know that. But yes, many people who have had onboard UFO experiences say the perspective of inside and outside the craft are very different. But what's interesting is, he woke up, right, on board a disc. So maybe it was more like 35 or 40 feet, actually, maybe.
Right.
Because when he walks off it, he can look at it, and it's like gunship metal. It's not lit up. It's not bright like it was in the forest. It was kind of off or parked. And it was parked in what appeared to be some kind of a hangar, what we might think of as an airplane hangar, except the ceiling was kind of lit with panels. Some were light and some were dark. So we tried to graphically represent that in this little film clip. And I don't know if you caught it or not, but when he walked off this ship and down this ramp, they walked by. Travis says he thinks it was about 5 other craft that were sitting behind them, and they look like shiny eggs, he described them. To me, that sounds like a Tic Tac.
Right. Yeah.
Possibly. We don't know. Yeah. But this was 1977, decades before we heard about the Nimitz or the Roosevelt or the Tic Tacs being followed by F-16s.
But he walked off of the ship on ground.
He walked off of the round UFO disc. It was parked in a hangar. So we don't know where that hangar was. We don't know.
Are we assuming it's on Earth, though?
I mean,
with gravity, and he's able to breathe, and
yes, he was able to breathe. He was able to walk. There appeared to be gravity. Absolutely. So was it an underground base on the Earth? Was it in a mothership that has those things provided?
Right.
He also said that while he was on the round UFO disc, it was very hard to breathe, and it was very musty, and it was moist, and it was like he was struggling for his breath, and he was in a lot of pain in his chest. As soon as the door lock opened, this guy took his hand and walked him towards, a door, and double doors opened, and then they were in an airlock. A door closed behind him and another door opened in front of him. And when they were in the airlock, sort of between the hangar and the inside of this little disc, he could suddenly breathe better. And then when the doors opened, he could breathe even better in the large hangar. And then he walked down a ramp across like a tarmac of some sort. He's described it as to me sometimes it's like, it was kind of a squishy floor, like you might find in a gym where there's weights, or sometimes now you go to specialized like exercise playgrounds that are built by community centers, and they have soft landing sites for the kids that fall off the swing and the monkey bars, I imagine it was kind of like that. It was a bit of a soft, squishy floor that they walked across. And one side of this hangar had a flat, straight wall with some doors and windows in it. And they walked through doors that opened down a hallway. And he got the impression he was in a medical facility of some sort, like a hospital, because he knew he was in pain. And even when he woke up, he thought he was being cared for in a hospital. But I imagine when he woke up, that wasn't a quick process. He explained that he couldn't see. He couldn't focus. All he could see was a light above him. And in fact, he thought he saw doctors around him because he saw what looked like what he thought was medical, headpieces and masks. But when he could finally focus his eyes, he realized there was almost nothing to the lower part of the face. And these were big heads and big black eyes. These were grays. Once he started to wake up, they came close and looked at him, right?
Yeah.
And that's when he went, oh my God, and he hit one.
Yeah.
And he said when he hit it, it was kind of like a frail 90-year-old woman, somebody who had very thin bones and was very lightweight and very fragile. And he fell back, right? And he fell back on the one behind him. And then the two of them were like stumbling. I think that's fascinating, And then, he realized that they weren't human and they were kind of scary to him and kind of ugly. And he jumped up, but this device was lying across his chest, which fell off. I mean, it's all very interesting stuff. The other thing that's fascinating is that the room he walks into, right? He's trying to find his way out of this craft. He doesn't know how to get out of it. He doesn't want to run into these aliens. So he goes the opposite way they go. When they leave the room, he goes out the same door and goes the opposite way. And he finds a room with this big chair in it. We used an egg chair with a pedestal base because that's what Travis described it looking like. So he walked in the room first, seeing the back of the chair. He was afraid one of these beings was in the chair. So he wanted to kind of like get around the side and peer in. And like, whoa, if there's somebody in there, I'm going to run out of here.
Yeah.
But there was nobody in the chair. So as he started to walk towards the chair, the whole room became a planetarium. The floor, the ceiling, the chair, every surface disappeared and became a surround planetarium.
Yeah.
So there is technology even in that description that we don't completely have, right? We can go to a planetarium and see a show, and it can be controlled by the astronomer who's giving you the presentation in the sky. And of course we can move the sky and give you appearances of certain things. But this was all by motion sensor. So as he walked close to that chair, he thinks it was like a navigation room of some sort.
And again, we're talking back in the 70s. This technology
70s.
is not something that.
Yes, I'm sorry, 1975. Yeah,
that's back then. So a couple of times, and I've now listened to his story in several different locations, he kept saying he saw these humans, right? These human beings, or what he believed to be human beings.
The second species he saw.
Yeah, fast forward now, and he's had all this time to think about it, and not that necessarily changes the reality of what actually happened, but does he still think that they were human?
Well, he describes them as being bigger than he was, more muscular, blue eyes, almost golden blue eyes, the way many of the Greek gods are shown to have like golden and bright blue eyes, platinum blonde hair, kind of all looking somewhat similar, like they're all cousins or nephews or nieces of one another or something. That's interesting.
Very.
We don't know.
Also,
what that
it
means.
sounds very angelic.
Yes,
From
also
biblical
very
terms,
angelic.
which
Yes.
I find
Some
very
people-
interesting because, angels, when it boils down to it, are literally extraterrestrial beings. They are beings from beyond this realm.
Many people have come to that conclusion. Yes.
And then,
Yes. So
Jennifer, another thing I thought was really fascinating is that, and by the way, to prepare for this show, we all listened to Travis and Mike Rogers' interview with Art Bell. in, I believe it was 1999 or 96 on Coast to Coast AM. A classic interview. It's amazing. I believe they were both on telephone with him. So very old school kind of vibes going on. But during that interview, Travis and Mike, well, Travis especially speculated about when they stepped off the ship, perhaps, and you alluded to this also, perhaps it was on a mothership. And, I think that in the 70s, that was a big pill for people to swallow, to consider that could have been stepping out onto a mothership. But you know what? Fast forward now to 2023, and a frequent guest of this show, Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb, just co-authored a paper with the Pentagon's, the Arrow's director, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, who just recently testified before the Senate at a UFO hearing. And a major part of their paper said that the Earth, they could be being seeded by probes from an extraterrestrial mothership. Now, this is coming directly from the Pentagon and the Harvard astrophysicist. This has as much powerful backing from the folks in charge of chasing UFOs in 2023 as you can possibly get. So I just thought that was fascinating. I wonder what is your take on that, how times have changed, but it has stayed so relevant.
It is hugely important, Tim, and thank you for bringing that up. In 2017, I think, or 20, I don't remember exactly when Oumuamua showed up, but I think it was 2017, October of 2017. Avi Loeb actually made major headlines around the world because he actually stated that he believed there was a very strong possibility that this craft, Oumuamua as they called it, because it was seen by the Pan-Stars, that's it, Pan-Stars observatory in Hawaii, had the best view of it. And from the pictures they took of it and the way they tracked it, it did not act like an asteroid because it came in on a fast trajectory, 90,000 miles an hour, slowed down, almost came to a stop, then rotated and took off in another direction. And it didn't have an outgassing tail like typical comets or asteroids do. So we knew it wasn't an asteroid. And by looking at it, we could tell that it could have very well been, I don't know if you followed this too, they did depictions of it where they thought maybe it's a long cylinder, but it could have very well been, just the way we saw it looked like a long cylinder, but it could have literally been a large disc as well. But just by the way we saw it vacillating, we may have just thought it was a cylinder, because all we did is pick up reflections of it and then kind of tried to create or recreate a drawing of it because it was so far away, from what we could see. But very, very fascinating. I'll point out to the listeners who may be younger than some of us. In 1975, the head of astronomy at Harvard was Donald Menzel, who was a huge debunker of the UFO subject, had written his own books debunking the subject, and most likely, it's pretty clear now, after his death, we know that he was one of the founding members of the NSA, the National Security Agency. And this was top secret.
Go figure.
Even his wife didn't know he was part of the NSA. So
some of that, I think, sir, will say
things have changed.
Yes, they sure have changed.
Things have changed.
Yeah.
And then I often like to invite people to consider why. What's going on that's different?
So that brings me to a question that I was dying to ask Travis. And
CJ, can you hold off on that real quick? Because we did have a listener with a great idea, and I just want to pitch this out to Jennifer, that technically Travis could call into the show if he wanted to. I could patch him definitely through. He would have to call my cell phone, though. But if he wanted to try, I'm not sure how well it would work on if you tried to play him over your phone, but I could patch him directly through to the show. on my phone if he wanted to give that a try.
I will. Let's see. No, I can't do that. I'm going to see if I can quickly text him your cell.
Okay.
Okay. Here we go.
Wonderful. And thank you
And
to
you
all of our
can ask
listeners that are
And I believe that Avi Loeb did talk about how his predecessor at Harvard was part of the reason he was kind of skeptical for going on there.
Did he? I don't recall that, but it's very possible. Certainly, he's talked about how so many people in that field, in his profession, are very hesitant to even speak about UFOs for fear that they will have backlash or that they won't be taken seriously. And he has been very open about, I've got tenure. I've got nothing to lose. I think this is what's happening and I'm going to pursue it. And we're so grateful that he is.
That's right. People
one
have to
thing-
wait till they have tenure. And
Yes.
even then they risk losing it, just like John Mack at Harvard. He had tenure by 10 years and wrote a book on regressions that he was doing with people, and he almost lost. And he was a Pulitzer Prize winning writer and a revered
Right.
professor, and he almost lost his tenure. In fact, they tried to boot him, and he had to hire legal representation, which he did. Good friend of mine represented him, and he was able to save his position at Harvard. But it's very tricky, even today.
Yeah,
Even
absolutely.
today.
So sticking with the Avi Loeb theme while we wait to see if Travis can call in, one thing that he also hypothesized is that these craft are using water or could potentially use water as fuel. And we're seeing so many now over water, right? And one thing that you mentioned, Travis said, was that the original craft he was in was very moist and musty, and it felt like there was, water, in the air. Is that something he's considered? You've considered that they're possibly using water as fuel to?
It's a really good question. Who knows?
Right.
I have heard stories. A friend of mine named Carl Feint wrote a book called USOs, about UFOs under the water and above the water, and he actually describes toroidal funnels of water being sucked up into craft. Maybe these little sport craft are just picking water up to take it to the mothership to restore, fresh water if there's a mothership at, I don't know, 80,000 feet or, 10 miles out or something like that. It's a speculation.
Yeah.
I don't have certainly a physics background to know why or how they could be using water. But we also know that if they're using some form of nuclear power or mercury or anti-gravity, it might need to be cooled. And we certainly use water for cooling, right, in our nuclear power plants. So maybe that's something to be considered. But, who the heck knows? It's just speculation.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, what
ahead, Steve.
exactly got? How did you get with Travis? What
Good
particularly spoke to you about his story, out of all the other thousands of UFO stories in the United States?
Well, basically, it was a bottle of wine and dinner. Like the way most things happen in the world. I was asked by a mutual dear friend of ours both, named Peter Robbins, whom he lived in New York. I lived in Philadelphia. Peter came to Philadelphia many times to speak. And Peter asked me if I would help him run one of the Roswell UFO conferences, because I've been a former event coordinator, and I used to do weddings and bar mitzvahs. So running a UFO conference is kind of second nature to me. And I have good people skills. And he was running a major conference for the mayors. So in Roswell, there are mutual conferences that go on simultaneously around the 4th of July weekend, commemorating the very famous Roswell crash in 1947. So I was there helping him run this event. Travis was one of our speakers, and afterwards all the speakers went out for dinner, and we were sitting there speaking with Travis saying, you really should run a conference in Snowflake. It's an area that could use the economic influx, because the Roswell UFO conference changed the nature of the town of Roswell. I mean, major hotel chains came in there. They got upwards of 10,000 people every summer for a week or two that showed up at these conferences. So we said to Travis, your event is 20 years younger or more than, 1947 to 1977, practically 30 years. And you should consider running a conference, because we told him your 40th anniversary of your event is coming up at that point. And we said, why don't you start thinking about planning a conference? And he said, oh, I can't do that now. And we said, well, look, Peter and I have experience. We'll lend a hand. And then in the planning of that's kind of what led to the documentary, because it was going to be in November on the weekend of the anniversary. And he wanted to take everybody up into the forest. And I said, Travis, I wouldn't take 150 people into the forest at night in the dark. Let's just film the whole thing and show it to them on a movie screen, in the comfort of a conference. I mean, you're going to need major insurance to take people.
Right. The liability.
What if somebody goes off to pee and they get lost, and then before you know it, they get bit by a rattlesnake, or they get, I don't know, abducted by a UFO. Or
it's getting your money's worth.
Hyenas, or a bear comes after them or something.
Right.
It's just too risky. There's too much to step over there, and too many older people couldn't manage that hike. I mean, it's a 45-minute hike from the nearest road. There's no bathroom. So it was like an insurance and a
logistical nightmare
for me. And I said, let's just film all the guys in the forest. So that's what I started to do in preparation for the 40th anniversary. And then I went, you know what? I've got a documentary here. I had interviewed the guys, and then I went, Deputy Ellison's still alive. So is, Marlon Gillespie. I made it. So I'm going to book a trip, fly back out there and start to interview these guys. And that's what I did. So 2013, 2014, and 2015, I interviewed everybody I could, including some other UFO experts like Lee Spiegel and Peter Robbins and Kathleen Martin and Stanton Friedman, who's no longer with us. And Stanton had been one of the people who had actually shown up and investigated the site, along with Lee Spiegel. Not Lee, Leo Sprinkle. So I interviewed all these people and then started to put the documentary together to be screened at a conference at the 40th anniversary. So that's kind of how it all came about. I kind of got into this like half-ass backwards. But I'm really glad I did.
It all worked out. Yes. Very good.
Yes.
At one time, Travis had said, and this was on the Art Bell show again, and they were half promoting the movie at the time, but also kind of half saying, that's not totally how it went, and retelling their story. And Travis said, after this movie, I'm done. I'm really done talking about this event. I'm done. It's taken over my life. I'm tired. I'm done. Was he ever done? Did he ever get a moment of not the Travis Walton abducted by aliens and could just live his life, or has this sort of haunted him since 1975?
Well, I think he's gotten to that hurdle several times, Chris, and I think he would like, part of him has moved on beyond it. I mean, part of him has a normal life. He has 14 grandchildren. He has 4 fabulous children that all live near him. He gets together with friends and plays his guitar, but another part of him realizes that he has an opportunity and sort of a responsibility. If he can make something good come from this, he ought to, because certainly a lot of bad has come from it in Travis's life. He will openly be the first to admit that many doors were closed to him. And if he could go back and do it over, he would never get out of that truck. And he's had to bear the brunt of huge amounts of ridicule and, rejection and judgment. that the normal person in their normal walks of life probably would not have to undergo. And for many years, a good 30, there was a focused debunker on this case, doing everything he could to unravel that. And that was Philip Klass. And there's evidence that I have found that he most likely was on the payroll of some type of organization that was attempting to undermine any type of truth and create suspicion. A debunker doesn't have to prove anything wrong. His mission is only to create doubt. Yes. And if he sounds scientific enough, and if he acts and has degrees and associations with organizations that sound sophisticated enough, and he can create doubt, then he's done his job. And that's exactly what Philip Klass did. And so that was very sad. He actually offered a bribe to one of the crew members, the youngest.
Really?
Yeah, he offered him $10,000 to say that.
Oh, and in your 20s, that's a lot of money.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And
in 1970. Yeah.
In 1970, he considered it. And of course, the other boys got wind of it. And so did his wife. And his wife talked him out of it. This was, maybe I better not mention his name. I don't want him to. I mean, it's in the film, but people can watch the film and find out.
And they should. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and we're certainly glad that Travis is still around talking about this. And I was telling CJ and Smitty, I think that, Jennifer, what has happened is that Fire in the Sky, whilst a departure from actual events, came out in 1993. Now, Smitty and I were seniors in high school. Okay. And so I think that now you've got this entire generation of people who are kind of in the prime of our lives. You've got Joe Rogan, who's in the same category there, and there's an entire generation of us who this movie left an indelible impression on. And I was hoping to pass this along to Travis myself, and hopefully it can work out for another time if it doesn't work out tonight. But he is on, this generation's Mount Rushmore of historic figures in ufology. And there's just no other way around it. And we're fascinated by his story, and we love to hear more about it, and we love to hear from the man himself. And so we're thankful and grateful that he's still out there telling the world about it.
And he is. In fact, we're both going to be at the McMinnville UFO conference. I think they call it the McManus UFO conference in Oregon in the middle of May. I think that's May 19th and 20th. We're also going to be in Sierra Vista at a UFO conference down there that's near Tucson, the Sierra Vista UFO conference, the very first weekend in May. So it's literally next weekend. Yes. Travis is actually coming to my house here in Anthem, and then we'll drive together down to that UFO conference. So I have a lot of respect for him that he just continues to go out and do this. And often, he doesn't get paid a lot to go to these conferences. Maybe he gets $100. Maybe he sells $100 worth of books and talks to people. But, it often barely covers his gas to get there these days, right?
You also have Contact in the Desert coming up in June, don't you?
Yes, I will be there. I don't know if Travis is presenting or not, if he's speaking or not.
I didn't see him on that one there, but man, there's a list of presenters.
Yes, I was very honored to be asked to present there. I think I'll be speaking on Göbekli Tepe, which is an ancient site in Turkey where I've been. I have a great interest in ancient archaeology, having a father who was an architect. I have some sophistication about building, and certainly these sites, are amazing. And I'm just getting a call from Travis right at this moment. Should I grab it?
Yes,
absolutely. And I believe Contact in the Desert is June 2nd through 4th, and I'm pretty sure that's in Indian Wells, California, a town CJ may know fairly well.
Yeah, I've been there. It's nice. It's definitely a good place to go have a conference.
Oh, yeah. And Contact in the Desert has a gigantic
huge list of presenters.
Including George Norrie, I noticed.
Avi Loeb too, if I'm not mistaken.
Avi Loeb, yes, I'm pretty sure is going to be
Travis
there.
is waiting to be admitted back into the show.
What?
I think he needs to. He may still be having technical difficulties, or he needs to click enter the studio.
Yeah, enter the studio. Is there a click for enter the studio?
No.
No, he says maybe scroll up.
Me as I would be if I was on the show, and then up above it says waiting for host.
It just says waiting for host, he says. I'm so sorry. Okay, I've let them know.
We can actually hear him through your phone. I wonder if we just have you put him on speakerphone.
I have him on speakerphone.
Oh, okay.
So if you want to, you just stay on the phone, Travis. They might try to just chat a little bit. I'm so sorry that he can't link in.
Oh, that's okay. We're just so grateful to have your time. Travis, can you hear us this way?
Barely.
Barely.
Oh, barely. Okay, so maybe Jennifer, you can repeat our questions.
I don't like to talk on
Yeah.
things like
Yeah, he said he doesn't like to talk on the cell phone anyway
Oh,
because
okay.
it's radiated as we all do. So, Travis, I did text you a phone number you could try to call in. If
And
you
so
want.
it would be audio only.
It would be audio only, 919-932-0032. Sorry.
All right, I'll see if I can
That's okay.
find that.
Okay. All right. Bye. Sorry, I should have muted myself on that.
I can take that out on the
I just
back.
realized my mistake.
Oh, good. Hey, we might get some great new information to that phone number. So I am so appreciative of him that he is still trying to get in. Here we are an hour later, and he's been having some technical difficulties, but he is indeed trying, which is amazing.
Yes.
So we appreciate that. I want to ask you real quickly, a theory that has come about is this idea that there was sort of an ancient civilization that was far more advanced than ourselves, that possibly created craft and left the earth, pre-dinosaurs, what have you. What you're describing for the humans, that we'll call them, that Travis saw, they sound like, is there any connection there? Is this a theory that you have considered or talked to anybody about?
Well, there are many people who have actually created what they call a taxonomy of various different types of species. The Ebens are one of them. The Greys are one of them, and the Nordics are these technical terms or these typical terms you hear of UFO contactees. So there are probably many species of life that have similar characteristics to you and I, meaning that when you look in the ocean and you see fish, there are many different types of fish, and they all have developed the ability to survive in the water with fins and the ability to suck oxygen through the water, and a large tail, and some can camouflage themselves, but they all basically have similar skin, eyes in similar places, right? Similar types of gills and things like that. So most likely there are various forms of species that have a head and 2 arms and 2 legs and some internal organs. And depending on their environment of their planet or where they've had to live, their environment creates particular types of physical
Hey,
characteristics.
Travis, can you hear me?
Did he hop on? I mean, this is the nature of life, right?
We may
Looking
have
at-
Travis online with us. Travis, can you hear us? Hold on. Travis can hear us.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, great. We have Travis Walton
Great.
joining us via phone now, and suddenly I feel a lot like Art Bell.
That's great. Travis actually answers this question very well himself too, about various species developing over millennium with similar characteristics, and it's
So-
likely there are many species out there.
Right. Travis, I had asked
Yeah.
Jennifer earlier.
I it's just my own thinking, but I had a theory that they refer to the aliens as humanoid, and a lot of people think, oh, that means resembling humans. No, humanoid means 2 arms, 2 legs, a head on top, 2 arms, 2 hands, and to me that's the most likely thing that's going to result in something that can manipulate matter, make machinery, and you're not going to have a slug make a machine. You're not going to have a giant cockroach make a UFO. It's just not the way you would develop something that can manipulate matter to create craft to come here. That's just my own thinking. Just biologically, the pressure to be formed that way would probably be so wide that you could have a variety of species, all very similar in overall form, coming here and be. And matter of fact, some could even look very much alike and actually come from different planets and develop independently. And in support of that, we have things here on the Earth. We have the American flying squirrel. In Australia, you have the sugar glider. Now they've developed completely separate. Now the sugar glider is still a marsupial, but the strategy for moving from tree to tree and that sort of thing is the same. And there's a number of other species where you have them developing completely independently here in similar environments and ending up with very similar forms.
So, do you have a feeling, Travis, for the human-like creatures that you saw at the time or now, a feeling if they were indeed human or just a humanoid alien of sorts?
Well, at the time, I took it to be human rescuers, rescuing me from these horrible monsters, But now, in retrospect, I think that they realized that I was not going to be cooperative unless I had something more familiar. Now, whether they enlisted the help of actual Earthlings or a species similar to us, or were somehow able to quickly simulate beings or the illusion of beings that would get me to cooperate and lead me to where I could be rendered unconscious again.
So possibly even some shape shifting happening. What do you think their intention was with you?
Well, at the time, I was just horrified by it and was, totally terrified. It was totally a negative experience. But in retrospect, I'm thinking probably the intention was to correct this accident that happened, that I had been injured by getting too close, and that they had the technology to repair the damage, but the damage was so extensive that they couldn't even employ mind control or hypnosis or that telepathy to get cooperation. So I was getting no messages of that sort from them. So in order to get me unconscious to where they could do the procedures necessary to save my life, they got something that looked human to me.
Wow. So it sounds like they were indeed trying to help you. Your initial thought of, hey, these are people trying to help me, is now you have other species that are trying to help you. For those of you that are tuning in, we do have Travis Walton on the phone now. We are so thankful that he's joining us via the phone. We have heard your story from Jennifer. She told it very eloquently and with lots of intensity, so we're grateful for that. We have been curious. Tim and I were talking about this just the other day. Have you had any other encounters or experiences since this one?
Well, nothing to report. I've tried to stick to events and sightings and anything of that sort that would be provable, multiple witnesses, that sort of thing. So other than one encounter after departing a Burbank MUFON event on the way home, Now, whether that was alien or not, all I can say is a giant black triangle sped towards us at unbelievable speed, stopped directly over the top of us. And, you know, in a city the size of Los Angeles, that's an amazing coincidence, at which point it stopped, turned to the right, and headed out to sea. Very incredible speed, incredibly huge black triangle. Now, if this was some United States military secret weapon of some sort, and they wanted me to report it, as such, knowing that I had just departed the Burbank MUFON meeting where Jan Harzan had just spoken. He had just recently becoming the head of MUFON, and Tracy Torme, who was the screenwriter on Fire in the Sky, had also spoken. And so I probably wouldn't even report it with the three of us seeing that, except that by the next morning, my oldest son had found a website where, you know, more than 15 other people had witnessed the same thing.
Oh, wow.
Separately, totally separately. You know, it was set up kind of like Google Maps where you've got little circles and numbers. And all these different people saw the same craft at that time. And I didn't take a picture, much to my chagrin. But I look forward to possibly contacting the other dozen or so people who saw it too, and hopefully somebody got a picture of some sort.
Do you recall what year that was?
Yeah, I have the exact date. It was on or about my son's birthday, who was driving, and the date, of course, would be on the record as to who was speaking at Burbank MUFON when you know, Jan Harzan had just recently become the head of the organization.
Was this
So
several
it was
years ago or
90
recently? Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was 90 something.
Okay. I only asked because we've had many people come on our show and mention that when they see UFOs above, all of their technology goes out, but our technology is very different now than it was in the 90s. So that's not necessarily a pertinent question for that.
Well, it didn't interrupt the functioning of the vehicle. My son said, "Dad, should we pull over?" And I said, "No, keep going." And I was, you know, embarrassed that I would have thought that I would have been more recovered in terms of being able to, you know, pull over and take a picture. But the fear that gripped me was surprising to me.
Powerful. I'm sure that the one time of getting out of the car and walking to see more and what happened after that has certainly
well, I learned my
stopped you.
lesson, you know, to be more cautious.
Yes,
I've
absolutely.
got a question for him. Prior to your abduction, did you believe in UFOs or any sort of alien life form, or is this something that developed because of your experience?
Well, I don't think there's anybody on planet Earth who hasn't heard of it and contemplated the idea. So yeah, I heard of it before.
Well, I just meant, did you believe?
It wasn't my hobby or anything like that.
Yeah, I just meant, did you like have a firm belief? That's what I meant. Like many of our listeners do, you know. So.
Well.
So, Travis, did this experience change your outlook spiritually in terms of what you believed and what you currently believe now?
Well, definitely. Of course, it, you know, confirmed my belief. I think the most likely explanation is that these were extraterrestrials. Some people say, well, what if it was something simulated that the military was doing? Well, that's not impossible, but I think it's a lot less likely. especially since people don't understand, to me, I would challenge the people who say that, there's nothing else in the universe. Give me a break. And, now that astronomers give us a lot more information about what's out there, the idea that we would be alone in the universe, the only planet supporting life, that's the preposterous claim.
Yes.
There are literally trillions, not just of stars, but entire galaxies.
Mm-hmm.
They pointed the camera on this recent improved telescope at the most empty space in the sky that they could, and magnified, detected literally hundreds of galaxies. Now, the galaxies is like the Milky Way,
Right.
the entire millions of stars. So, and one other thing that NASA has recently been more affirmative of is that, see, they had this thing called the it was a theory about I can't think of the name of it right now, but the Blake equation, something like that. Anyway, they had formulated a way to calculate the number of possible life-supporting planets in the galaxy. Well, now with greater techniques to observe planets, they say it's a virtual certainty that every star has about a dozen planets.
Mm-hmm.
So the numbers you would plug into the Drake equation, yes, the numbers you would plug into the Drake equation would be enormously greater than what was previously thought, because they were trying to be conservative and say, well, maybe one star in 10 has a habitable Goldilocks zone. Obviously some of the planets are going to be close to the star and way too hot, and some will be too far out, not getting enough energy to support life. But now that middle zone is so certain to come about that they figure that there are literally billions of planets that support life. Now, I make the point that just because they support life doesn't mean they're all going to be coming here. I mean, we had 50 million years that this planet was dominated by dinosaurs. And it was just kind of unfortunate for them that they got killed off and allowed for humans to come along. But, we've only been here, a few tens of thousands of years. Nothing compared to the 50 million years of dinosaurs running around on this planet. So these life-supporting planets out there might not all be supporting, bipedal humanoids, but still the numbers are astronomical to coin.
They certainly are, yes.
Yeah.
And I believe that's the James Webb telescope you were talking about that got those recent shots, those recent images.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll make you feel small, right? Billions of stars like our sun, billions of solar systems
I make
like
the
our
point
solar
that,
system.
some of these aliens out there are not advanced. Some of them are like cave aliens. The time frame of their development varies tremendously. Some of them, though, could be many millions of years older than us. And look how far we've come in a few thousand years. A few thousand years ago, the greatest technology we had was fire, and not much more than chipping rocks and building fires.
Right.
So how far we've come just in the last 100 or 200 years in terms of technology. You imagine that multiplied by millions of life-supporting beings out there that have had millions of years to refine technology. I think the so-called scientific skepticism that, well, maybe they exist, but they could never get here. Um, it's pretty arrogant and presumptuous to put themselves in the position of second guessing what technology might produce in a few million years.
Absolutely. As Avi Loeb said on our show recently, well, there is an intelligent life form that has sent probes into outer space, and it's us. So there's proof that there could be others too.
Yeah,
And
it can happen.
yeah. So again, we're talking with Travis Walton and Jennifer Stein. Jennifer was the producer of their documentary, which is called Travis, the true story of Travis Walton. And she was kind enough to reshare parts of that story with us while Travis was having some difficulties entering. So for those of you that are wanting to know more about exactly what happened, that documentary is a really great place for you to go and check it out. And we will use our time with Travis to dive into some current event questions and other things that are going on. I wanted to ask one quick thing before I send it over to Tim and Smitty for your guys' questions. We had the joy of listening to your interview with Art Bell back in the 90s, and what a phenomenal interview that was with both you and Mike Rogers. And one thing that Mike said, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think this interview was in the early 90s. But one thing Mike said at that time was somebody knows something. Somebody has information about what is going on and what we're seeing, and they are slowly releasing that to the public until they believe the public is ready to know more. Now we're talking 20 years ago.
I do agree that our government and military know a lot more than we do. They may not know everything, but those who are demanding complete disclosure, to flip open the books and tell the world everything we have, are not understanding that this would put us in a very compromised position concerning our global enemies, because they're not going to flip open their books. And as long as our military can keep them guessing about what level of technology we might have acquired, we're a lot safer than if we tell them just what the limits are. Because these other countries probably have their own levels of knowledge about the phenomenon,
right,
that they would compare to us, and might inhibit their desire to attack.
Yes, absolutely. So do you think that we are, as a public, getting closer to being ready to know more, with our government now having, Arrow and coming out with declassified?
Well, yeah,
UAPs?
you and I and your listeners are all ready. But generally speaking, I'm pretty skeptical about much of the rest of the world.
Right.
The aliens are looking at humans and observing a bunch of savages. Savages. I mean, there are over 100 wars going on amongst humans at any one time. If you look at entertainment, it's all about who killed who, who's going to kill who. There's so many of them that just result on homicide and depend on that for the interest. It's just discouraging to think that we have that much of an obsession with things of that nature. I think the aliens are waiting for us to be ready, but we've got a ways to go. I mean, our better scientists, our more open-minded and thinking people like you and your audience are completely ready to communicate with these other civilizations. But so many people on the planet, the first thing they'd want to do is, we want free energy and we want the secret to all your weapons. Tell us how to make powerful weapons.
You're so right. Weapons would be the first.
Of course, if they gave us free energy, that would be a global economic collapse. Petrodollars run the world, and I don't know how they could possibly grant that kind of quote unquote help without, doing a tremendous amount of damage.
It's true. Yes.
It's like, you go into the jungle and there's a bunch of apes having little territorial skirmishes with each other. We say, let's help them. Let's give them some technology, and I would expect nothing but damage from such a thing.
Yes, let's give these wild apes some weapons, right?
I don't think Jane Goodall would
Yeah.
approve of that strategy.
Oh, well, let's see. Let's jump into do you want to get some hot takes from him, Tim, or some listener questions?
Yeah, we do have a listener question here for you, Travis, from listener Sid Phi. So going back to when you exited the ship onto a larger structure, which, we've talked about that in a lot of different possibilities, but our listener wants to know, is it possible that you could have stepped out onto another planet, and how profound that might be? And what are your thoughts on how does it make you
Well, that's
feel that
definitely
maybe you're the
possible.
first
I have
human on another planet?
Yeah, that's possible. Or it could have been some sort of giant spaceship out there somewhere. Could be a hidden base here on Earth. I don't know. I couldn't see outside. The light coming through these panels looked like sunlight, but I really don't know whether it was sunlight or an artificial source that seemed like natural light.
Right. And speaking of mothership, Travis, and we're going to get into some current events with you too, if that's okay. Have you had the chance? We talked about in the 70s, it was kind of a big pill for people to swallow to consider that you might have been on board an alien mothership. But here we are in 2023, and we have Avi Loeb, the Harvard astrophysicist, co-writing a paper with the Pentagon's UFO director, UFO investigating director, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, they just come out and say in their paper that alien motherships could be seeding the Earth with alien probes. Have you had a chance to read this paper, or have you seen about that in the news?
No, I haven't read that paper. It sounds kind of speculative. We need hard data before we. But it's the theory that they would want to take this ecosystem and employ it for themselves or something. An alien takeover. I'm skeptical of that. They've been around here for decades, maybe hundreds of years. And if they wanted to remove the humans and use this planet for themselves, it would have happened a long time ago. We'd have never known what hit us. And it's not a matter of American fighter jets having dogfights in the sky with flying saucers. It's absurd. There's no contest. The kind of level of intelligence they have, like I say, no contest. So obviously, the fact that they haven't done it suggests to me that they don't intend to. I think Gene Roddenberry with Star Trek, his creation of the concept of the non-interference directive. So the series was space exploration, but in each case, making sure that the people on the planet were not aware of this craft near their planet, and it makes perfect sense. I mean, when they go to study the great apes in the jungle, they try not to influence their behavior. They try to observe from afar and not shape the behavior, just observe it.
Oh, yeah, that does make a lot of sense. We have a listener, Nora Lade Swinburne, who says she's also a UFO abductee, and she says she has an implant in her left femur. Have you ever thought that you might have any sort of implants or surgical alterations that were done?
Well, I was concerned about that, and I had upper body x-rays in the aftermath of this. Didn't detect anything. much to my relief. But
I bet.
I
there were
guess
some
so.
other medical tests that were interesting. Anomalies in the brain scan that subsequent scans did not detect later. So there may have been a result of the aftermath of the injury that I experienced there.
Yeah, certainly. Or even the initial shock from the light or the beam that came. I would assume that would have some sort of repercussion on your health.
What's that?
I said I assume that beam that you were hit by would certainly have some repercussions on your health or your brain or what have you.
Oh yeah, probably at the time it was probably
Yeah.
fatal,
Right.
So I was very concerned about negative health effects, but I had none, I worked long hours to just sort of escape thinking about it. I'd worked 12-hour days for, decades, and I wouldn't even take vacations. I would just work through vacations, and I never called in sick one time in all those years. So that was reassuring.
So I had asked Jennifer this earlier. In that interview that you did with Art Bell, you were promoting the movie Fire in the Sky, half promoting, half telling your own truths of that story. And you mentioned that this was it for you, that you were done talking about it, that you didn't want to talk about it anymore. And have you ever gotten to have that break? Are you feeling like it's resurfacing again?
Well, for a while, I tried to hide from it, and refused interviews and just didn't want to talk about it. Like I said, working 12 hours a day, but that wasn't working. You can run, but you can't hide. You know what I mean? I wish it never happened, but nobody's going to forget it. So I may as well try to make something good come of it, and if at least educating people to have a more reasonable perspective on this phenomenon.
Oh yeah. And Travis, this is Dr. Mounts, by the way, with All Things Unexplained. Speaking of Travis Walton on the phone, I was telling Jennifer earlier that we are so appreciative for you being out there and continuing to tell your story and go on podcasts like this, because there's a whole generation of folks out there like myself, like CJ, like Smitty, Fire in the Sky, whilst a departure from the actual events that you experienced. It came out in 1993, and I was a senior in high school. I think Joe Rogan might have been a senior in high school. There's a whole generation of folks here who put you on their Mount Rushmore of ufology, and we really look up to you, and we really appreciate having the chance to hear straight from you about what really happened.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you for the opportunity to express my thoughts. There's been times I've been tempted to just walk away from it and not talk about it anymore. Even change my name or something. But the prospect of perhaps having a remake of Fire in the Sky and setting the story straight, and including some perspectives that I didn't have back at that time. So I'm working on that.
Well, what is the one thing that the movie got most wrong out of all the story that was yours? What did the movie get?
Well, I think the movie makers knew that I wasn't going to like the abduction sequence because it was just so different from what really happened. When I received a copy of the script, those pages were not in it. And for obvious reasons now, but it was one scene where the actor, when I was on the table, has a membrane over his face, and he's struggling to scream through it, struggling to yell, and I thought that was, although it wasn't what happened, that it was probably better at communicating to people the level of panic that not being able to breathe fully added to my level of fear. It was just nothing can make you more fearful than the feeling of suffocation. But how do you show that on camera? Somebody breathing hard and looking scared. So the idea of a membrane to show people how would you feel if you couldn't yell or speak or breathe with this thing over your face. So that was probably a story device that improved on things without being accurate at all.
Yeah, you mentioned Star Trek, Travis, and interestingly, here we are, 2023, and our pop culture and our news cycles are inundated with interest in UFOs and aliens. And, we're just real curious, and our listeners are curious. What is your take on our current inundation by UFOs from Jeremy Corbell, who's been instrumental in releasing all sorts of classified, potentially UFO videos and photos, to Skinwalker Ranch? Now there's a show where they're investigating on the History Channel, to Pentagon departments named Arrow investigating UFOs, to NASA, to military encounters. We can see them on 60 Minutes talking about them, to spy balloons getting shot down in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, to over Super Bowl weekend, we had 3 UFOs that got shot down by the U.S. military that they still won't reveal any information about. What's your take on this, Travis?
I think definitely that government knows more than they're letting on. But I think as far as the position of these beings, it's apparent to me that they could continue with everything they're doing here and remain completely undetected. I think their technology would allow them to be here and we never know it. The frequency of so many sightings that are just at the edge of our ability to confirm in a way that would cause worldwide panic is intentional. That they're letting us glimpse just to get us to look up and think about the other possibilities. And that's the most they can give us to urge us in the direction of getting outside of ourselves and thinking about where we might be in a million years. It's just too big of a coincidence for them to just be always just a sighting, nothing you can confirm, a picture that's not quite good enough to spark this worldwide panic or disrupt things. The non-interference directive is just give them a hint and wait for them to grow up.
You're so right. And we have noticed, and I'm curious as to your take on this, everything that we have revealed to us about UAPs. So I'm going to switch to UAPs now to reflect what they're currently telling us. It's all kind of a very, I don't know, kid gloves type of way. They never get into anything, for example, like alien abductions. We don't hear any of our Congress people talking about alien abductions or Arrow or NASA.
Want to avoid causing a panic. And, I accepted the term abduction in my own case, but in retrospect, it was more of an ambulance call than an abduction. So maybe, I've heard of other cases where people felt they were abducted and then realized later that, medical issues they had been resolved, much to their surprise, that they didn't realize that might have been a side effect of having been taken. But I try not to comment too much on other reports because that was my major objection to people coming off as experts about my case when they didn't even have the facts. So, unless I've investigated a particular incident or case, it would be wrong for me to comment on those things, especially in the position I occupy now. That I don't want to bias anybody's thinking about things, and try to plead with people on any issue, including what foods to eat or what law to vote for or whatever. Get the facts first. People, come up with opinions and they don't even know what they're talking about. Come on, at least make it informed. You can have any opinion you want, but at least don't guess about what we're talking about.
That's great advice. And Travis and Jennifer, we would love to get y'all's hot takes on a few topics around ufology and perhaps the future of ufology as well as we near the end of the show. And Jennifer, you're welcome to chime in on some of these too. But Travis, I don't think you heard this, but part of our prep for the show was hearing an interview you did with Art Bell on Coast to Coast AM. I think that was via phone,
that was one of the classic interviews.
Yes.
And, he was a very, very good interviewer, and he made some great comments to my skeptics that were pretty telling.
What did you think of Art Bell? Because a lot of us really look up to Art Bell and his role on Coast to Coast AM.
What I think of him?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, he was a pioneer, a great man. Yeah.
That's a good hot take.
Yes, well said. And what do you think about, soon after Art Bell, George Knapp came into his role with Coast to Coast AM, and it was integral in bringing out Bob Lazar's story. What do you make of Bob Lazar and what he has told about, I believe it's S2 or a very close proximity to Area 51?
Well, I don't know, and I refuse to comment on cases I haven't investigated, but I do know a few things about the Bob Lazar situation that I'll just leave it to people to conclude what they want about it. But I knew some people that knew him, and they used to go out, burn a tree out in the desert and drink beer and visit and talk, party out there. And they knew that he worked at Area 51, and it was no big deal. He hadn't revealed any of this information yet. So to them, it was not news. So as much as I admire Stanton Friedman, him saying that he was skeptical of him because he wasn't in the phone book, and I'm going, wait a minute, come on. If he's working on secret stuff, then that might be a good reason not to put him in the phone book.
Yeah.
Oh, one other thing. He did he marketed a thing through the Tester Model Corporation, which, normally made model airplanes and sports cars and stuff for kids to put together. It was a kit for a UFO, flying saucer. And that one thing that was a product that they came up with resembles the craft that we saw in the woods there more than anything else that I've seen. So other than that, I don't know too much about Bob Lazar. I mean, was at one or two events where he was, and we didn't have a chance to speak. So I don't know anything about it.
That's too bad that you didn't get to speak to Bob. That would have been a great conversation to be a fly.
Right. Meeting of the minds.
So Travis and Jennifer, not too far from where your incident, Travis, took place in Arizona, sits, I guess you would have to call it the ultimate in all of ufology, and that is Roswell, New Mexico, where something happened in 1947, and perhaps it has sparked all of this. Who knows? But I would love to know what
I've
take on
spoken
that.
there at Roswell on the anniversary, the last 6 or 7 years, and and I'll be speaking there again this coming July.
And what do you think happened in 1947, Travis?
Well, I'd say that it was a weather balloon or something like that. It's a pretty lame cover-up because nobody's going to mistake. It's like in my case where they try to say, oh, what they really saw was a fire watch tower. Absolutely no similarity, not even close in distance or appearance or anything. It's just something to say. And for people who don't want to believe things, all they need is something of that nature. Just give me a reason to not believe, and there they go. It's like so many things in today's world. People begin with a conclusion and then look for facts to support it. No, what you do is you gather the facts and then weigh the evidence and then make a decision and form an opinion.
That's right. And we have a listener question from listener Amber Dahl for you. I think it's a great question for you, Travis. What do you think about the possibility? And of course, this is supported from recent papers from the Pentagon and again, asked various astrophysicists. What's the possibility that some of these extraterrestrials could be using our oceans?
Or in the ocean?
I think that's definitely likely. Probably, if they can travel in space and be completely independent of the external environment, to it'd be a perfect cover to be underwater. Yeah.
So for those of you that are tuning in, we are talking with Travis Walton and Jennifer Stein. We did get Travis Walton on the phone. If you're watching live, please stop texting Dr. Mounts so that we don't have to hear his phone chirp. He can't turn that off because we have Travis Walton through his phone. So
it's not helping that the NFL draft is tonight, and I don't know why my iPhone wants to tell me. No, I don't know why my iPhone wants to. Maybe I can. I don't know why it wants to tell me every single person that gets drafted in the NFL draft tonight, but it's trying to. It's
talk about how far technology has come, huh?
So this is definitely a question for both of you, Travis and Jennifer, because Jennifer, I know you've done some research into this area. What's your hot take on this notion of crop circles?
That's a long chat for me to answer.
Well, we definitely know that some of them are people, faking them. People have said, I faked that, but again, like I was saying, some people, they so want to disbelieve that they'll even fake the reason to disbelieve. Who knows? It doesn't make sense to me what a crop circle would be for. But I don't know. Like I said, I haven't investigated these cases, so I don't know.
I've spent a lot of time.
I do know that the presence of the craft in our case had an effect on the growth of the trees nearby. So there could be a relative effect that way.
Oh, yes. You spoke to Art Bell about that. I think Mike talked extensively about that with Art Bell and the tree rings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we also covered that in a section in the Travis Walton documentary. So people can see that. There's also short little clips of that at the website, traviswaltonthemovie.com.
Yeah, which is actually some newer information because when the effect was first discovered, we just thought it was just one tree, the one nearest where there. But to discover that a ring of these trees exhibited this effect on the side facing the craft, that was the clincher on that whole bit of data.
Yeah, and speaking of trees and sort of this other older, sometimes ancient evidence of extraterrestrial visitation, there's a show now on Netflix called Ancient Apocalypse. It's been described by some academics as the most dangerous show on Netflix, but they go extensively into the evidence of ancient civilizations that came before us and their encounters with other beings. And what did both of you make of ancient aliens?
Well, I was on the show Ancient Aliens a time or two, and that was a very fascinating experience. But, like I say, they've been coming here a very long time. And perhaps you go back far enough and people didn't have the framework to even know what they were looking at. So they would call it something else, angels or demons or something of that sort. But they've been coming here for a very long time.
That's right. And I couldn't agree with you more.
I think Jennifer might want to chime in there too. Sorry.
I was just going to say I spent a lot of time and read most all the work of Zecharia Sitchin and did some film work for Zecharia when he was still alive. And I think there's a lot of Sumerian evidence that there were city-states, kingships set up by beings that may well have come here from another place. I now speak on Göbekli Tepe, and even Klaus Schmidt, who was the key archaeologist who uncovered Göbekli Tepe and tried to make sense of the drawings and the motifs that are carved on those megalithic standing stones that form stone enclosures like Stonehenge, sort of, but there are multiple ones in Göbekli. He even thought about the cattle and grain text that are in the Sumerian records. I think they're on display possibly at the Pennsylvania Museum, University of Pennsylvania Archaeological Museum in Philadelphia, where I used to live. And those cattle and grain texts talk about two beings, Lahar and Ashnan, who came from an area a high abode, whether it's in the mountains or whether it's above the earth, we don't know, but it's called the Dooku. And they came to earth, it says, bringing the knowledge of grain, the hybridization of grains. And we can trace now with genetics the original cereal grains we use today, like barley and wheat, coming right from that area in Turkey near where Göbekli Tepe is. So is is that text, the cattle and grain text, a memorial to this bringing of this knowledge to earth?
Well, yeah,
maybe
a little bit of tampering going on there with, the non-interference directive, but still things in the Amazon, they're discovering evidence that what was for many years just considered to be dense jungle, undeveloped forever, they're finding that, in the distant past, that it had been clear-cut and farmed on a large scale, supporting a great population. So that was a surprise there.
Yeah, that it would be an ethical dilemma, if you were just a neutral outside observer, unbeknownst to those being observed, and you witnessed this population or species about to say go extinct. How long would you continue to observe?
Little nudges, not overt interference, not taking over, but help out now and then.
Right. And I just have one more hot take for you, Travis, before we move on. During your Art Bell interview, I believe Mike alluded to some potential encounters with what might be described as men in black or some shadowy government agents, perhaps. Have you had any dealings with such as that?
Nothing I can prove, but yeah, I think they would undoubtedly have an intense interest. And they could probably go a long ways towards helping me prove my case, but are staying out of it.
We had an interesting listener question come in. And this is something that we talk about all the time, about how much our technology has developed since, the 1960s, what have you. It sounds like when you were on the craft that the technology you were witnessing was far more advanced than technology that we had here at the time. And one of our listeners, Amber Dahl, was wondering, are there now technologies that you are seeing existing here on Earth that are comparable to anything that you saw while on board?
Well, that would be speculation, but yeah, there could be things that have been developed. Maybe they're just watching us come up with this stuff on our own and hoping that we don't come up with something that's too self-destructive. This AI stuff is scary.
Sure is.
Yes.
Terrifying.
I'll add to that. I think there was like a proximity sensor to some extent when Travis walked into what he calls the navigation room, for a lack of a better understanding, the large round room with the egg chair in it that turned into a planetarium. So as he got close to the chair, it turned into a planetarium of sorts, but
well,
it
that's
was
reasonable speculation. It could be a way of seeing where it was for close quarter navigation, maneuvering, I mean.
And then when you were on the outside of this room, Travis, around the edge, it seemed like a solid room, correct?
Yeah.
So there was some sort of sensor.
Perhaps some technology that allowed the observer from certain position to see through the walls of the craft.
Right.
Or maybe the image was transmitted to the interior somehow.
Were there any planets visible when it turned into the planetarium?
No, just points of light.
Just points of light.
Oh, that's
Nothing I recognized as a planet. No constellations I recognized. But
yeah.
Right. And I'm sure you only really recall maybe 2 hours total, correct, of the 5 days that you were gone?
Yeah, just that one brief period.
Yeah. So here we're all trying to get you to recall minute details of something that's probably very foggy in your existence.
Yeah, completely obscured by the dominating emotion of absolute terror.
Of course.
Pain of injury, etc.
Yes. So I will admit that, had you asked me 10 years ago if I believed in aliens, UFOs, etc., I would have said, no way, not even a thought on my radar, right? I would find the one reason to dismiss it, and I would dismiss it. And I've met so many people now that have had these really profound experiences in these stories, and it is hard to deny that they're reality. And I've just had an awakening, I will call it. And most of the people that we've had on this show have talked about their experiences in a very beautiful way, in a way that it has enlightened them, and it has been more of a positive experience than a negative one, because we do see in sort of movies and what have you that these experiences are always meant to be terrifying. But most everyone we have talked to have had more profound experiences than that. And hearing you talk about them bringing you up to heal you and to make you better, would you say that this was, other than sort of your backlash from people, was it a positive experience for you?
Well, I try to interpret it in that way, to certainly less traumatic than I thought at first. The idea that it might have been a rescue, making up for my own foolishness to get so close to get a place where some accidental discharge may have occurred. That's a better take than them like firing a weapon at me and maybe perceiving my approach as threatening or something. That doesn't make sense.
Well, we certainly thank you for sharing your story with us. Tim, Smitty, do you guys have any questions before I ask a final one?
I was just going to ask, what, if anything, were you more apprehensive about going out, actually back to work after this happened, or did you?
Yeah, I found that a definite obstacle to overcome, and I started carrying a rifle with me for all the good that would do. But I was determined to overcome that fear, and I did.
Well, I'm glad.
In the daytime, anyway. I didn't like being out there at night if I had a truck break down or get stuck or something.
Yeah, that's understandable.
Yes. All right, Tim, final questions from you?
Yeah, Travis, I just wondered one thing, and Jennifer kind of gave us some insight, but going back to the very beginning here, when you were knocked over by the craft, and Mike and the other guys, for whatever psychological reasons, flight or fight or fear, they decided to leave in that moment. What's always been your take on their initial reaction to do that?
Totally understandable. Anybody who said, "Oh, well, gee, some friends they are," to take off and leave you. No, from their point of view, the only sensible thing was, if this is a weapon that could kill people, and they thought I'd just been killed. They witnessed somebody being killed. What good would it do to jump out and run over there and get killed too? So I think that it was understandable that they would flee, but at the same time, I give them a great deal of credit that they did come back to see if they could rescue me, or that I was in a revivable condition. So they all get A's for courage. Now in the movie, it was they didn't want to come back, and Mike said, "Well, I'm going to go back anyway," and left them waiting beside the road. But no, when he offered to let them not go back, they all elected to stay in the truck, which is much more sensible. There's no reason that they would feel safer waiting beside the road for Mike to go check on my condition.
Right.
They all went back.
And I could tell you, we could hear, in my opinion, the sincerity in Mike's voice as he talked about that with Art Bell. So I think that his sincerity and his loyalty, and his friendship, it definitely came through. And just one more thing I wondered for you, Travis. You've had a lot of time to reflect on this incident. Okay, here y'all are out here logging, working on your job, and there is a UFO out there on the ground, or perhaps hovering above the ground. After all this time, what do you think it was actually even doing out there to start with?
Well, that's speculation, but learning years later that area has the highest frequency of lightning strikes of any place in the continental United States outside of the Everglades, which is over water, led me to think more about what this high frequency of lightning might have had something to do with it, And when lightning hits these trees, it doesn't just automatically burn up the forest. What it does is it the tree is a lightning rod to ground out, and it travels through the bark, the moist layer under the bark, because the inner part of the tree is pretty much dead. It's the living part of the tree is in the surface. So the electricity travels down through the bark and instantly turns that sap to steam, which explodes and blasts a strip off the side of the tree. And you can walk down the rim road there. If you're within sight of a tree that's been hit, you can see the next one that's been hit within sight probably. So it's a high frequency. If you don't want to go up there where the incident happened, the Heber Chamber of Commerce has one of those trees right in the front yard. It's got a strip of bark blasted off of it like that. And it's still growing. It's healthy and everything. It's just that that's what happens when lightning strikes. But the curiosity was that a side effect of lightning striking the ground is the creation of unique crystals.
Oh.
Crystals that are not formed geologically. You've got millions of degrees and millions of volts forming very unique structures. If you'll see the illustrations that they came up with on the Joe Rogan show, pictures of these crystals, which are called fulgurite. Now, there could be some valuable purpose for them to be in the area, researching these or harvesting them or something. It's just speculation, but it is, a rare coincidence that over the entire United States, to have one area have the highest frequency of lightning strikes. I've even speculated that the blast of energy that hit me might have been some sort of secondary discharge, that they had picked up some kind of energy that when I got too close, it just leaped to me through ground.
That's amazing.
And probably had fatal consequences.
Yeah.
We've had guests on this show that operate a crystal mine in Arkansas, and they have had legitimate UFO experiences there, enough so to get Josh Gates with Expedition Unknown out there, and even left, physical evidence. It magnetized different things in the area, and yeah, we totally get that a lot about the potential for crystals being involved.
Wow. Well, incredible. We are just so thankful to have you guys here and share this story with us. And for those of you that are joining later or didn't get to hear the entire thing, you can certainly watch the documentary. The film's website is traviswaltonthemovie.com. There's interviews with everybody that was involved, the eyewitnesses. I think one of the things that makes this story so compelling and so believable are those eyewitnesses, the people that were there to witness what happened to you, Travis. And Jennifer, we thank you for bringing that story to life for us. And before we sign off here for good, Travis, for those that are skeptics of UFOs, skeptics of abductions, what thought would you want to leave them with?
Well, like I said, get the facts first. Now, not every report is an extraterrestrial fact. I think people do make mistakes, misidentify things. That happens. But the skeptics, when they can seize upon an example and say, see, we proved it was something else, that doesn't disprove the entire phenomena at all. Failure to prove does not disprove. It's just a silly error of logic that people make.
Travis actually makes a great comment in the film, which I really love and is one of the real moments of humor. He says, I wouldn't wish this experience on anyone except maybe a skeptic.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful for them.
Absolutely. Yeah. It would be. We're all skeptics till it happens to us, right?
Yep.
That's for sure. Well, thank you to all of our listeners who tuned in, who shared their comments and questions with us. And thank you to Jennifer and Travis for joining us. It's been a wonderful, enlightening evening. And Smitty, why don't you go ahead and take us on out?
I just want to say, when I watch Fire in the Sky, there would be no absolute knowledge that I would ever be talking to Travis Walton. This has been phenomenal.
Well, thanks for having me, and I hope I've left some food for thought.
You definitely have, and thank you, Jennifer. And remember, listeners, we're on all social media platforms. We're also on all podcasting platforms. And be happy, be strange, and listen to All Things Unexplained. Have a good night.
Excellent. And Jennifer will just remind you to stick around so we can upload.
Good night, everybody. Thanks, Travis. Thanks, Jennifer. We're going to go off air now.